Welcome back to the channel. So normally I do PC and Mac stuff, but I've got quite a collection of old 8-bit computers and 16-bit computers as well, and this is something I picked up very recently. I don't know if it works, I literally just picked it up yesterday. It's a boxed Commodore 64 and it is a bread bin type, I think. So it comes in the box is a little bit battered, and this is the Modern Music Maker and the Image System variant. So Commodore were known for kind of bundling different types of packaging to try and sell their hardware at different times of the year. For example, they do kind of Christmas type specials, or when a particular game came out that was going to be popular, they did a special variant of that, and this one seems to be one of these. I'm not really familiar with it. I don't think everything's inside, but let's have a look. So, nope, well, we've got a computer, so that's a start. It's extremely brown. I don't think that's the colour it's supposed to be. But yeah, that is a brown computer. I think it's supposed to be a bit lighter, but even that looks a bit dark. Maybe they came in this darker variety at one point. But I thought most bread bins were a little bit more beige than brown. Anyway, have a computer, so that's good. We have a Commodore 64 microcomputer user manual. Some of the pages look a bit loose, but it's nice to have that. We have the all-important power supply. Let's just move the box. So they have the all-important power supply. So these have a reputation of failing, and when they fail in a way that creates higher voltages in the output. So what tends to happen is it tends to fry your Commodore 64, at least that's reputation. I've also heard people say that that mainly affects North American power supplies rather than European ones. I don't know if that's true. You can buy replacement power supplies for that very reason, so you don't have to plug one of your old ones in. This has got some cracks on the top, and again it's quite mucky. It's not as brown as the computer. Is that the colour the computer should have been? Maybe. We're probably going to risk it. Probably are going to plug this in and see what happens. I don't know if the computer's working. It was sold to me as for parts. The other thing that's in here that's tangled up in here is the RF cable. So we'll try and get these untangled. We'll find a display that we can use and then plug it in and see if it goes boom. So another uninspiring thing is that the power supply looks like it's been repaired, and certainly the plastic's broken at this end, exposing the cables. There's no crack in the actual cable insulation, but this is a little bit worrying potentially. So let's have a quick look at it before we blow it up. So yeah, it's a lot browner than I'm expecting. This legends on the keys I'm assuming are supposed to be white or cream, but they're very definitely a kind of beigey brown, cigarette smoke colour, should we call it. As is the whole case. There's a bit of streaking in the case here. Still got its logo, so that's good. It's got the funny dual-purpose cursor keys that Commodores were infamous for. Yeah, there's a definite change in the case colour here, so I think this is probably the original colour. So on this side you've got the power in, power switch and 2 joystick ports, and a label saying Harris. So I presume this belonged to somebody called Harris at one point. Around the back you've got the cartridge port, RF out. One of these is an RGB, which I think is this one. Then you've got the cassette port, serial port, then you've got the cassette port, and then you've got the user port. And on this one you've got an exposed potentiometer, which I think is for changing the channel. There's a little label just underneath it that says BSI. So I presume that's for fine-tuning the output from the RF port. Who knows? Underneath we've got the original label. It's a little bit torn around the edges, but it's a C64, 5 volts and 9 volts, 15 watts maximum. It's got a serial number, and not a lot else. Got some marks in the plastic from where the power cable has been resting against it and has melted it. Still got all the feet The 3 screws across the bottom are intact. There's no warranty void label that I can see. So I don't know if they're supposed to have one. I don't know if this has been opened. But it's got a number here, 34. 6XD/34. Okay, this is maybe a postcode written in invisible ink that's now become visible. Anti-theft, maybe. Yeah, it's got a postcode and a number. That's anti-theft pen has been used on this in the past. So to do justice to this machine, we've got this lovely Sony Trinitron 14-inch colour TV. So that's what we're going to hug this up to, see if we can get an image out of it. Okay, plug the power supply in. I'm not sure how much is kind of live, if you like. So the power supply is not warm, even though it's been plugged in for a minute. So that's a good sign, I think. Let's turn the machine on, see what happens, see if we get a red power light. We do. There's no funny noises, there's no funny smells. Okay, that's good. Let's turn it back off and get the television on. Okay, so the television has been used before for retro computers, so it may already be tuned to channel 36, I can't remember. Let's turn it on and see if we get a signal. Okay, well, we're not getting a signal. That could be because the television isn't tuned. Just going to go through the pre-programmed channels. Yeah, no, there's nothing already in there. Okay, let's eliminate one source of problems. So instead of using the RF cable, we've got an RGB cable here. Now I've got this because I have some other Commodore computers, but it happens to work on Commodore 64s as well. So for the North American viewers, if you're not familiar with this, this is called a SCART connector. And we can basically plug this in the back of the television and it'll take the RGB from the other end straight to telly with no RF in between. So we should get a nice clean signal. And this will at least tell us whether the computer's working or not. So I've got the telly set to the SCART input. And in theory, when we turn this on, we should get an RGB signal. Or not. So there was a slight flicker there. But we're not getting what we're expecting. So yeah, so no video output at all from this poor Commodore 64. So it probably is broken, I'm afraid. Let's open it up, have a little look, see if there's anything obvious. So I've never taken one of these apart before, but it looks like there's 3 screws across the front and that's it. I don't think there's one under the label, I can't feel one. The screw wasn't very tight, I think somebody's been in here before. It's a bit of a click though when they open up. I'm guessing we turn it this way up. Presumably there's a keyboard connector somewhere. There is, but it's a very long lead, so that's good. So looking at this, there's not a lot to see. There is a fairly dusty motherboard, but nothing actually that's too bad. In fact, this heat shield, RF shielding here is suspiciously clean. So maybe somebody's been in there. All the components look like they're still attached to the board, for example. Just feeling some of the components. So we know the board is getting power because we had a light from the power LED. Across the back here in the back left corner there's a load of socketed chips. It's very likely that one of these is the cause of our non-functioning computer. I'm just checking they're all in their sockets. I'm just feeling the temperature of every chip, just to see if anything feels unusually hot. They all feel just very slightly above room temperature, which means they were at least initialized when the machine got power. Should we have a look at that fuse first? Let's pop this fuse out. Try and get it out without breaking anything else. So I can't see any fuse wire in there at all. Maybe just be the lighting in this room, I'm not sure. But let's check it for continuity. Presumably if the power light came on, this must be working, yeah? So we are getting continuity, so that fuse is correct. So that's good, let's put that back in. The board does contain quite a lot of capacitors, electrolytic capacitors, but they all look fine. And this was constructed in a time before the capacitor plague. It's got a 1983 date on the board. There's probably different revisions of this board. I don't know which one this is. There's revision B, it says on it, underneath this heatsink here. Let's put the power back in, turn it back on, and see if anything warms up. Should probably have checked those voltages first, shouldn't we? Power LED is indeed lit. Television is off, by the way, so don't expect a signal on there. I'm just going to give it a minute to warm up, and then I'm going to use the finger to touch the different components, see if anything's warm. So the only chip really on the motherboard that's actually warm to the touch is this one up here, a 906.11401. I'm not sure what chip this does. I'm not really familiar with Commodore, to be honest. So I was a Spectrum guy, and then BBC Micro, and then went straight to PCs, and the whole Commodore thing bypassed me. A friend of mine had an Atari ST, but I didn't know anybody had a Commodore, so this is all kind of new to me. Let's go back to the power supply and see if it's that's a problem. So here we have the end of the cable, and these two pins at currently at the bottom, but would be at the top when you plug it in. They're the AC pins, and it's the 5-volt one, which is the top pin up here on this video, but at the bottom if you look at the socket. And so one of these is ground and one of these is 5 volts. So let's just see. So that's 5.3. It's varying a bit. Yeah, it's hovering around 5.3, but sometimes drops to 5.2. So according to the Commodore 64 wiki, that means this power supply is on the way out. It's too much voltage on there. It's probably not enough to have damaged the motherboard, probably yet. One of the reasons I was a bit slapdash about plugging it in and turning it on is because the previous owner had told me he'd done that already. So whatever damage was going to happen was going to happen. I just wanted to know whether it was working or not. So the power supply is probably on the way out, but is not yet dead. So we have another problem somewhere on this system. So currently the machine's on, there's still no video signal. Let's start trying to work out if there's any voltages going around the board. So use this as the ground, measure the rectifier here. So that's 4.94 volts, so that's correct. On the input on this one it should be 20 volts ish, I think, and it should be outputting 12. Both of those are correct. So the board's getting the correct voltages, it seems. Yeah, so the board's getting the right voltages. These rectifiers are working, the fuse is working. So it's something else that's not working. Now we're quite lucky on this motherboard in that a lot of these chips are socketed. So what we could do is take them out, clean the sockets and reseat them and see if that gives us any joy. But otherwise, I think without a diagnostic cartridge and without an oscilloscope, we're probably not going to be able to do a lot more diagnosis on this machine straight away. The other thing that's occurred to me after taking it apart is that there was no RF shield across the top of the motherboard, and I think there's supposed to be. If you know one way or the other, please put a comment down below. But yeah, there was no RF shielding at all on the top, which I think there normally is. There's obviously RF shielding around the video components, but I'm assuming that there should be one across the whole top, like there is in the Amiga, for example. Sorry, like on the 64C. So let's take these chips out, deoxit the sockets and replace them and see if that helps. I'm just going to double check the temperatures. Now that it's been on for a moment. I mean, there is one possibility, and that is that my cable's faulty or the television is not working correctly, but I don't think it's either of those because I've had this cable working before and this television working before. And there is, when we turn it on, there is an initial change to the screen. So I think it's something else is going on. Right, let's try dealing with these socketed chips. Let's remove the keyboard connector first, just so it's not in the way. We don't want to damage it while we're pulling out these chips. Power's obviously disconnected. The other thing that occurred to me is if someone's already been in here, just make sure these chips are actually in the sockets the right way around. They're all the same way around, so presumably that is the right way around. Not the most exciting television. So I don't have a chip puller, so we are having to do this the manual way, as it were. I've managed to get it out without bending or breaking any pins, so that's a start. Can't quite get in from the back. Number two's come out successfully. The pins don't look particularly corroded or anything. This one's got a capacitor right at the very end, so that's a little bit awkward. So this one I have bent the pins on. We'll need to straighten those back up before he goes back in. That one's come out fairly easily. Let's take this last one out. So I'm not really expecting this to make a huge difference. That came out very easily though, so maybe it wasn't in quite so securely, maybe. But I'm not really expecting this to help a lot. It's more likely there's a problem with an actual component. It's a little bit corroded. So I think it's more likely that I'm gonna have to replace something on the board. Deciding what to replace is going to be the hard thing because I don't have an oscilloscope. But let's get these sockets cleaned out a little bit. Make sure I'm the right way around. So this is one of the bent pins, so we're just going to straighten those first. Here we go. Those look straight enough. Let's get it back in its little hole. So this chip here has got some paint on it. Is that significant? Does that mean someone's tested it. Does that mean someone thinks it's faulty? Don't know. That one went back in fairly easy, so the fact it came out fairly easy means it's probably just a loose socket. Alright, so we'll give it a few minutes for the deoxit to evaporate, and then we'll give it some power. I'm just looking at this, and I'm just thinking that shouldn't there be a RF shield / heat shield underneath this motherboard? I can't see one. There's normally one clipped to the front, I think, isn't there? Let's take this out and have a bit of a closer look. Some of these screw heads look like they've had a screwdriver in them before. And in fact, I think, is there a screw missing from here? So yeah, so definitely no heatsink / RF shield underneath, which I don't think is right. All the solder looks original though. What I was wondering is, because these chips are socketed, I was wondering whether someone had been in here and replaced the chips and socketed them, but I think that solder looks too neat. I think that is original. But yeah, I think that's supposed to be a shield under here, isn't it? Obviously we've not looked under this RF shield yet. Let's do that now. So it looks like it's held in place with some clips, one of which is already undone. So I think somebody has been in here before. So you twist these so they line up with the holes. And then they can pass through the motherboard. This one though had already been done. This one I think is part of the RF shield. In fact, that one may be as well. So maybe somebody was looking at the RF shield before because they couldn't get a signal out. Is this writing supposed to be here? M6, is that from factory or is that a sign of a repair? As I said, I've learned very little about Commodores in relation to most other things, so who knows. So in theory this should now come off, unless I've done something dumb. Yeah, looks like the top would have just popped off anyway. I think it does. There we go. So still got a bit of thermal paste on there, and that's not bone dry, so I'm thinking someone's been in here. This chip is also socketed, don't know if that's normal. So now that I've taken the cover off, I can see everything in there looks normal. So this is the video chip. This is the VIC-2, but still no video out. So let's definitely take this out and reseat it, see if that makes a difference. I mean, there's a 99% chance it'll make no difference at all, but we should try it in the absence of anything else to try. So I could really do with a chip puller on this end because I don't want to chip it, it being ceramic. There we go, managed to get it out without bending any pins. Again, it looks in very good condition. I don't think it's corroded. Let's put that in, let's put the heatsink back on. In fact, there's not, because I haven't got any thermal paste to hand. Let's just see if we get a video signal now we've reseated it. Nope, nothing's happening. Okay, so let me get some heating for this so I can put the lid back on. So still no video signal, even having this re-socketed. And so I think that's basically as far as we can go using the equipment we've got available at the moment. The next thing to do would be to order a diagnostics cartridge for this. And there's some very handy dual cartridges around these days that allow you to do normal diagnostics and diagnostics on a dead machine, which this one appears to be currently. If we need to replace any of these chips over on the left-hand side, then that's easy because they're mostly socketed. If we need to replace some RAM chips, that's a little bit more tricky. My desoldering skills are pretty poor, but at least we can give it a go. At this point, we haven't got anything to lose. The machine isn't working. What's the worst that could happen? Very worst case, we could use this as a donor machine. We could, once we worked out what chips are working and not working, we could use them to donate to another Commodore 64. So that's called the end of the video there. End of part 1 in a series of unknown many. I hope you found it interesting. Join me again in the future when we'll be revisiting this Commodore 64. See if we can bring it back to life.